Give it a few more seconds. My name's Brian McFarland. I'm the Director of Information Technology, Arizona State University. I'm the guy spinning around on the right, or your left. Dan, I'm going to be giving the first half of this presentation, and Dan's going to be giving the the second half. And he's on your right. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Our talk for today is entitled Automating Student Laptop Configurations. So, give you an overview of what we're going to be discussing. I'm going to go over some of the problems with managing student laptops and when they bring them in to you and some of the problems with that. What are some of the solutions with dealing with the influx of laptops that come in? We're going to discuss and come up with what is the ideal solution to this problem. We're going to go over what our implementation is to solve this problem, and then how your school can take advantage of our implementation. That's the portion that I'm going to be discussing. So, the current problem. Our school, we'll have about 230 new laptops this fall. They come in, the students say, I want to get set up on the network. Well, they don't know what that means, but for us, that means they want to be able to print, access their files, get the antivirus software on their machine, enable the firewalls, Windows Update, if you have any special clinic software packages, any other licensed software that you have for your students. So we have 230 of those coming in every fall. So you can imagine that I'm sure a lot of you guys have the same setup. So you've come up with a couple solutions for how to handle that influx of laptops. One of the things that we do is a new student orientation, and there's an IT division for that. We sit down with them and give them the rules of the road, tell them what services are available, and then we let them know about IT breakout sessions. And basically, we have everyone from our IT staff. It doesn't matter what you do, if you're the web designer, or programmer, instructional technologist. Everyone comes in with a big checklist, and we just hammer through students. It takes all of our employees about half an hour with each student. It takes about 2 weeks to get through everyone. It's not the best solution, but it's what we've been doing. Other typical solutions. Can I just see what are other people doing for this influx of laptops and getting them set up? What do you guys do? Right.
Where we do all this, but we're still getting situations where students are either, they came to orientation, they have the handouts, but they weren't listening and didn't read, and it's kind of...
Right, it's a kludgy, you're just giving them information and it's just going nowhere. Yeah. Anyone else have similar? What do you...
It's our first year requiring laptops, so we have about 200 or so students coming in. Our plan is to, this will be our first time, to hold labs. So to help, have 3 or 4 labs a week for the first month, and just have the students come in as they can.
Are you putting in?
The whole configuration.
Are you putting an image on their laptop of your standard step? Yeah. Okay. I saw another hand back there.
We kind of separate the laptop stuff and the regular computer orientation stuff. But in computer orientation stuff, we actually have small groups that we run into different labs, get them on and talk about kind of that stuff. And then for the network, we pushed it all off on our student employees for the most part. We have times several days a week that I have different student employees there from 1 to 5 or from 8 to 12. It's a walk-in, first come, first served basis, and they do almost all the laptops.
They go through it.
And then if they run into problems, one of
So some solutions.
Wireless setup.
What was that?
The wireless setup. You have that on your image already?
We actually don't do an image, and I'll get to. I haven't touched our solution yet, but you'll see. You'll see. So some of the things you'll have, long lines at the help desk. You had mentioned you pass out handouts with easy to follow steps. A lot of times those just get lost. Sometimes you send an email to the students and tell them to follow these things, and you know that you're not interested in setting up your computer, coming to law school. You're interested in learning the law. That's why you're there, not to learn how to print. So that's not your thing. Other people have mandatory programs, and they'll put an image on the laptop with that. Those are all various solutions that people are doing. Some of the downfalls of the solutions. What do people see as problems with their current setup? Long lines.
For us, it takes weeks. We probably have 2 weeks.
So it just kills your productivity in other areas. Other help desk problems are coming in. You're probably not able to address them. Takes extensive staff time. For our method, it wastes student time. They're standing in lines basically to come and get their laptop set up. So we're spending their time ineffectively. Another problem that we've seen with these typical solutions is a lack of quality control. If you install printers one way and maybe you have to manually install a driver or something, one of your employees may do it correctly, the other one may not. And if there's a problem, it's always difficult. You don't know that you're starting from a baseline. You kind of always have to make sure everything was done right. So there are quality issues with some of this process. Another thing is keeping help desk staff trained. I know you'd said you use student workers. For our student workers, when we had them, the largest turnaround time was during the summer, and so we'd be hiring new students in the fall. And we'd have to get them up to speed and have them doing it at the same time. And it was really, it wasn't the most conducive situation. So we know what we're doing. We know what the problems are there. Now we want to define what is the ideal solution. What would make a perfect solution? So sitting thinking about that, we decided we want it to be automated. Very little human interaction. It should just do it itself. It should be time-saving. It should take less staff time, less student time. The time to implement should be on the student's time schedule. If the student wants to come in at the library at 11:30 at night when there's no support and get set up, they should be able to do that. So they shouldn't have to work around our schedule for getting set up for the network. Last, that defines an ideal solution is a quality-controlled process. Something that's going to be the same for every student. That way, if there's a problem, we know where they're at, and we can address the problem accordingly. So, our implementation. It's a web-based product. It requires very low technical knowledge on the student's part. It's a one-click application for them, and also for your IT staff time to put it up. And I'll be showing you what it is. You're probably wondering, what is this? For the IT staff, for you to implement it, it's very easy to put up on the web. It also meets all of the needs. It's automated, saves time, and has a very high-quality control process. So you're saying, what is it that you guys are doing? Why did I come to this presentation? Well, it's a web-based application that automatically joins a laptop to a Windows 2000 domain. By a show of hands, can I see who has a Windows 2000 domain either at the law school or at the campus, or that they have access to? So, half of the people. What's that?
Most of our students have XP Home.
That is an issue, but for people that, and I'll get to that in a second, what the requirements are. If you don't have a Windows 2000 domain and you don't have some of the ideal setups going in your infrastructure, like XP Home, some of the things that Dan's going to be talking about will still be applicable for you. You can be running Windows 98 with no network whatsoever and still take advantage of some of these features. You just don't get the fully automated setup. We use, so if you're familiar with Windows 2000, you have things called organizational units, OUs. And you can map software and installation scripts to those organizational units. There's such a thing called MSI files, which Dan is really going to be going into, that allow you to create a software package and attach it to an OU, and then that software package gets installed when that person turns on their computer and gets on the internet. We use group policy to lock down the machines, so that way we turn on their firewall. We make sure that the outside hackers, can't get to their machine. We also do we attach logon scripts to the OU. Things like installing printers, mapping network drives, that sort of thing. We're doing with logon scripts. So just about anything that you can imagine doing to a computer can be done to it once it's in an organizational unit. So you had mentioned some of the requirements. Well, your requirements to run our application is a web server. Anything that can run something dynamically, running ASP, .NET, PHP, Perl, JSP, Clarion, whatever application framework you're using will work as long as it can do some sort of dynamic generation of websites. You'll also need a Windows 2000 domain with an OU that you can add computers to. You don't need to be a domain admin of that forest, but all you need to do is just have permission on one OU. The student's requirement is XP Professional or Windows 2000. If you're a down-level client or an XP Home, like I said, you can still take advantage of some of the features, but it's not going to be as simple and streamlined of a process, and I'll show you that in a second. So, to see it in action. Typically when you're running it, it takes about 4 to 10 minutes or so, depending on the speed of their computer and the speed of your internet connection and your network as a whole. So, how does it work? We send the students an email, print out cards with a URL, and hand them to all of our students that say, go here to set up your laptop. Our implementation, we have an intranet for our students to log on to, so we get their name and password so that they authenticate and we know that only our law students are connecting to this. So they go to this address, they type in their name and password, submit. We have an agreement that they have to agree to, because basically when you're added to an organizational unit in Windows 2000, the IT department at our school has full control, essentially, over their laptop. So that's something that they need to know when entering into this. One of the policies that we have set up through Windows 2000 Active Directory is to deny specifically anyone from the domain in the network from logging on to that computer. So that way, if our domain is compromised, someone really has to be familiar with it in order to turn that off to be able to log on to the computer. And that's also a very heavily audited process. So I don't have to worry about our help desk people connecting into a student's personal laptop. They don't have the privilege to do that. Once the student clicks agree, that's the one-click process, your computer will be renamed. This is an optional component. You set this in a configuration file within the application. If you're familiar with Windows networks, you know that you have to have a unique name. You can't have two computers called OEM computer. They butt heads. So we use a naming convention of law-their user name. And so their computer's renamed to that. They hit OK. It'll reboot their computer. I know this looks a lot like the viruses that were going around the screen. It's not. So it gives them 60 seconds to save their work. The agreement that they agreed to also lets them know to save their work, that they will be restarting. So it gives them plenty of time to save their work. They reboot their computer. After it reboots, it attempts to join the domain. It attempts a few times. If for some reason it fails, it'll either give them the error 5x09, whatever code it is, or you can optionally choose to have it say an error message, call the help desk at whatever for assistance. So you can have the diagnostic code to try to figure out what the problem is, or if you want, just a friendly message. So once it's joined the domain, you'll get a message saying, OK, it's joined the domain successfully. We'll have one more reboot. Again, the virus-looking message, giving them another minute to save their work. And you get to the logon screen. This is really the only part that's going to be confusing to your students. With Windows XP, you have the click on your head to begin or the automatic logon. When you run this process, since it's a member of the domain, it now wants to log you on. So they're presented with this. They have to give the 3-finger salute and type in their password. If some students are really adamant against that, there's a way that you can still have it log in automatically. I want to note, though, at this point, that we're having the students log on as their local account on the computer, not as the domain user on the domain. That's a restricted user with a mandatory profile that really locks them down and will give them not the best experience on their laptop. They won't be able to install stuff, that kind of thing. So you say, well, if you're logged on to the local machine, how do you have access to the domain resources if your username on your local computer is Bob, but your domain password or your domain user is Sam? How does that work? Well, when we had them type in their name and password, not only was that used and cached on their machine to add them to the domain, it was also used to cache the password using the Windows caching and authentication system. So that way, anytime they access asulaw.asu.edu, any resource there, it automatically uses those cached name and passwords. So if they connect to a print server, a file server, any sort of resource, it automatically uses that name and password. And it's encrypted using Microsoft's recommended encryption algorithm kind of thing. Some FYIs and gotchas of this process. More of an FYI. The application that we'll be giving away here in a second, all its configuration is done with the config file. Things like, what is the name of my domain? What OU do I want these things to be in? Do I want the error messages to be cryptic or readable? How am I going to pass the username and password to the application? That sort of thing. Students, as I mentioned, students will still log on to the laptop and not the domain. We've just, from thinking about it, it seems that that's the best option, at least in our school. It may be different for yours. As the other account's a lockdown account. This way, too, when the student leaves the school, they're not still dependent on your domain. If their computer is still a member of your domain, but you've deleted their account, you've deleted their computer account, they're gone, it doesn't matter. Their computer will still work just fine. Must have a unique computer name. As I said, that's optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to rename their computers, but the moment you have two with the same name, you're going to butt heads. So you're best to rename. Must have a procedure to clean out the old computers. If you're doing this for 3-4 years, as with user accounts on a network, they collect, and you have to have some sort of mechanism to remove them. So whatever process you're using to add user accounts, I would strongly suggest you augment that process slightly to include the removal of computer accounts. It's not that big of a deal if they collect. You'll just, after 10 years, have a couple thousand computer accounts that aren't doing anything. But it's wise to just keep it cleaned out. So, how do you get this software? Well, it's free. We've made it free. It's happyware, I guess you could call it. Here's the URL to get it. You can download a CAB. It's a CAB file. It's a zipped file that contains a CAB file, the example code to use the CAB file, which is an ActiveX control, the examples written in ASP. You can, like I said, we're actually using a .NET implementation, but we threw this ASP. You can use any language. You get a README file with all the instructions that should get you to go. We've been beta testing it with other schools. We've been using it ourselves, but the configuration in other schools for a while, and they seem to be pretty happy with it. Now, if you're the kind of school that wants the source code, wants to check it over, wants to make sure everything's right, and or really needs the support, we are going to offer a pay version. You get everything above, you get the source code, and you can talk to the development staff if you have any questions about how to add some new features, that kind of thing. The cost on that's going to be kind of dependent on the circumstance, and the money will go back to funding other software that hopefully we can give you in next year's CALI. So now you say the laptop is in the domain. You really haven't accomplished anything other than getting it in the domain. Now what do you do? So for that part, I'm going to hand it over to Dan. But sorry, I'm throwing you off. It's always nice to see something in action. I wanted to give you guys the slides in case this didn't work. I don't know if you're familiar with VMware, so I'm using VMware VPN to our university. So this is just a Windows XP Pro computer. I'm going to I'm going to log in here and have it run the process. Like I said, it takes 9-10 minutes, so I'm just going to click OK and then hand it over to Dan. At the end, we'll show you that the computer will be joined to the network. I'll have printers installed. My network drives will be mapped. I'll have a few applications installed as well. And the Microsoft download component to do your hot fixes is turned on and forced to be on. So I'm presented with the click yes to continue. I agree that College of Law will own my computer. And our sample agreement's in the README file as well, so that you can use that. So it's now going to restart, and while it does its thing, I'm going to hand it over to Dan. And there'll be time for questions at the end if you have.
Yeah, well, he's unplugging that, and I'm getting set up. Let's just give him a big hand for that presentation and offering it to him. I am one of the schools that he's been trying this out with, and we haven't run it through with a full student population yet, but I've used it for a bunch of different setup tasks in the law library in college, and it works pretty slick. His team of programmers really did a good job on that, and as far as support and things like that, if that's something you're interested in, they're a pretty decent group. I've had features I've asked him to add that have been out to me in, I think, 5 minutes from the time I asked from them. So they're really a bang-up group there. All right. There we go. Okay. So now you've got your machine in the domain thanks to this program or whatever else you've done to get it there. What can we do from here? If you're familiar with group policy, you know some of the options you have. Things like going and setting security settings should be nothing new to you. If they are, I suggest you read up on it. But what I'm going to focus mostly on is, okay, you're in here, you're set up, how do I get my applications on this computer? To quickly revisit the problem that Brian framed for us, you have every year, you have a new batch of computers, 150 to 200 of them. Everyone needs your law school standard applications. So you've got your printing account client, your antivirus, you've got research software, you've got a test client. Any of these types of things you use, and you've got to set that up on 150 to 200 machines. Each one needs to be installed identically. So, your printing software is all pointing to the same print server, for instance. And if there are any problems in that process, you hear about it later. Students generally can't do this by themselves, even though you do make as much an effort as possible to bring them up to speed. Fact is, they're going into law, they're going to be law professionals, not IT professionals, and who's to blame them? And they bring a wide variety of hardware and software to the table, all of which you need to be able to work with. So that's the 1Ls, but what else do we have? We also have to update and change software throughout the year. Existing applications often need patching, upgrades are released. You may add something new to the law school suite, like you retire your antivirus and move to a different product, or you go and license one of the testing products you heard about at CALI, and that needs to be put out everywhere. You may need to remove software if your licensing expires, or if you find that a piece of software is exposing your network to danger, whatever else, whatever your reason is. And instead of dealing with your new students, you're dealing with 600 to 800 students for this process. Complicate things even further. Oftentimes, students aren't running under full administrative privileges on their laptop. You still need to get software installed. What do? Well, that's an issue. To make software work under those contexts, oftentimes you have to tweak security settings on files and registry keys, and you're doing that over and over again. It's a very technical process on 600 machines. Law students generally can't do this by themselves, and then what happens in the classic example when a law student decides to clean up his hard drive and takes out every application you've installed? Well, you've got to deal with that. Typical solutions, ways people deal with this. Install everything by hand. You've got 20, 30 minutes per student. Apply patches as problems arise, probably not as they're released, because you don't hear the students coming in when the patch is released. They're not that proactive. You hear about it when it's erased their test file or something has gone horribly wrong. repair applications as students break them, usually by installing them, because let's face it, it's too much of a pain to dig in and figure out why it broke instead of just reinstalling it. If you're really good, you're going to script as much of this as you can to try and make your life easier, but it's still a process, and you still have to create new scripts as the problems arise. And then, of course, do your best to educate students on being better computer users. I think that's something we strive for anyway, but yet we still have all these problems. So the ideal solution, in a perfect world, what would we be doing? Software would be installed automatically. We wouldn't have to think about it. Every installation would be identical. So like Brian said, you'd start from a baseline. You'd know what's supposed to be there when a student comes in. Essential files and registry keys would be replaced if a user deleted them. Now we are getting into a perfect world. This sounds pretty good. Security settings on file and registry keys could be set as part of installation. Software could update automatically from a central location. And if needed, you could remove software, allowing it to, pardon my pun, be there and back again. So how do we get there? I'm going to talk about the holy trinity of Windows software setup, and this is the first component of it. It's Windows Installer. It's essential. We'll talk about that in just a second, but it's part of this trinity of components we're going to go over. Windows Installer is going to work with these MSI-based installation packages, which I'm going to attempt to explain from sort of a 20,000-foot perspective. And then installations, upgrades, and rollbacks would be managed via group policy. So a combination of group policy, the installer, and these files that we're going to discuss are going to get us to this ideal solution. All of these are free with quotes around it, because free assumes that you have already paid for the technology, essentially. If you're running a Windows 2000 domain, you have group policy, and if your students are up to date, you have Windows Installer and MSI-based installation packages, unless you're running a Mac or Linux shop, in which case you're going to have to come up with something else. So Windows Installer, what is it? I'm going to attempt, through this next section, I'm going to attempt to give you a quick overview of what these technologies are, and briefly how to use them. I am going to be going pretty quickly through this. I will be posting this PowerPoint online, which has some good references in it, and I'll be pointing you to some resources to learn more about the nitty-gritty of using these technologies. So Windows Installer, what is it? It runs the service on your user's computer, and if you've ever gone into your control panel services, you've probably seen it if you're running 2000 or XP. You've probably never had to mess with it much because it just sits there. It doesn't really do anything. What it does do, though, that you may or may not be aware of, is it deals with these MSI packages that you want to install. It essentially gives you some extra logic above and beyond what you get with, say, setup.exe. You have a part of the system now working with that to facilitate the installation. It can do things like allowing restricted users to temporarily elevate their security context to one capable of installing the software. So if someone's running as a power user account and they don't have access to something they need, you can still get it on there via Windows Installer. It also provides self-healing capabilities to MSI-based applications. So if you've installed something with this combination of technologies and set it up properly, if these things get deleted, they'll end out back where they need to be for your software to run. Configuring Windows Installer. You don't have to. It configures itself. So long as it's installed and running, you're fine. Now that may not be the case. It is something you can turn off, and if you're some sort of super hacker, you can get in and screw it up. But chances are they haven't done that. If their laptop is up to date and they haven't turned the service off, it should be there. It is recommended that you upgrade this to the latest version on your students, or recommend that they do. They're available there. That's a really difficult URL, but it will be in the PowerPoint. You can also go on Microsoft's site and just search for Windows Installer, and it's a free download. Okay, so Windows Installer, not much to it, but it does a lot, and it does what it does through working with these MSI files. And so what are they? They're basically the new breed of setup files. They're a replacement for the setup.exe you're used to using to put a piece of software on your computer. They're more than that, though. Whereas Setup.exe is some specialized program that was written by the application developer to do what they want, an MSI file is actually a database, and it contains information about every file, registry key, and INI manipulation you need to set up a piece of software. So this is how Windows Installer can know what you're supposed to have for a piece of software to be running right. It can also contain information about the security settings that you want to set on this stuff after you install it. And MSI files are open. I put open in quotes essentially because this is not reference to like open source technology where Microsoft gives you the source code and says go for it. We all know that that's not really their approach to life. But open meaning they provide you documentation with how it is, how it works, and other developers can build tools to work with these files. I'll give you an example as we go on, but just keep in mind that they're open in a sense. Vendor supplied MSI files. Chances are you've already worked with this. If you've installed a version of Office before that was equal or greater to 2000, you've run an MSI file. Even if you clicked on Setup.exe, it just called it. It has been adopted as Microsoft's new standard for installation of Windows software, and so people are moving more and more to it. Like I said, a lot of stuff you've already gone through is going to be using it. You may need to tweak it, though, and we'll get into how to do that a little later. So let's go over a really simple one. Let's say that a student, you want to deploy Adobe Reader 6.0 to all of your students, and I think that's one that we probably use. If you go through a manual installation of Adobe Reader, you see that it's really, really easy to do. The only thing you ever have to configure is, I would like this in Program Files, Adobe, whatever. And from there on, it takes it and runs pretty well. Since that's probably okay with us, we don't really need to tweak this to deploy it in our environment. But we do want to test it. And this is how I test MSI files to make sure they'll deploy properly to students or whoever else you may be deploying this to. You go through and install it in what's called silent mode. And silent mode causes a piece of software to be installed without any user interface from a command line. One thing to keep in mind is that, say you're one of those people who didn't raise your hands that has Windows 2000 Server, you can still do this. You can still go through and script these sorts of installations by having applications run in silent mode, and you'll still get, I would say, 80% of the solution. Not going to be as slick, but you can still do it. This is how it's done. It's a command line program called MSI exec, which is sort of the heart of Windows Installer. Anything you need to do with an MSI file, you can do using this program. With these switches, or running it with these switches, causes the system to try and install Adobe Reader without a user interface. If it works after being installed in this way, chances are it will work in a deployed fashion, meaning you can push it out to all of your students and they don't have to know anything about it, and it'll install properly. You do want to test everything before you try deploying this. What about something trickier, though? What about, say we want to put virus scan on a laptop? NAI also gives us an MSI file to work with. However, their installation is a little trickier, and you might need to tweak this before you install it in your environment. So once again, we install this piece of software manually. During the process, we're asked for licensing information, regions, setup type, which components we want, whether we want Alert Manager or not, where we want it to download updates from, types of scanning we want to run, do we want it on the start menu, do we want it in the system tray, and do we want a password for it? And it's still not configured, even after all of that. So when we talk about things like quality controls and wanting to make sure that every laptop's set up identically, this is a potentially hairy application, especially if you have work-study students installing it who aren't that familiar with your environment. It's still not configured. We're pretty close, but we haven't scheduled any DAT file updates. We haven't scheduled full system scans, and we're deploying it with ancient DAT files. So if you bought Virus Scan 2 years ago, you're giving them 2-year-old DAT files from the beginning. So remember the point I made earlier about MSI files being open. This is where this comes to bear. And Because they're open, vendors often will give you tools for working with the MSI files they ship. This is something you want to test when you get a piece of software. You want to look into the documentation, see if there's a network installation section in there. They'll often reference tools like this. NAI does have it. It's called the Installation Designer. And this is what it looks like. Basically, we've got all of the options we would have where we're running setup, but it's not actually running a setup, it's designing a setup for us. So you go through here, through their custom application, you say, for instance, we want auto update, we want an email scanner, we don't really care about on-demand scanner or whatever your preference is. Other things that you might have, like which DAT files you want to deploy, do you want to patch this before you deploy it? You can embed licensing information into your setup file so students don't have to deal with that. And the end result of this is you have now a new MSI file with all that information built into it, and you can test it as you did the one before. You can install it in silent mode, and you'll see that it installs as you told it to with no user interaction. So what if there are no vendor tools? There will increasingly be such, and big applications especially already do have them, but not everyone does. You can still muck with these things. It's a little trickier, but there are a lot of tools out there to deal with it, and a lot of them are free. So we're going to look at two of them really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and just admit that these are not the two best tools out there for dealing with MSI stuff, but they're the free ones, and so that's why we focused on them. There are a number of suites out there that we can talk about at the end if you'd like that make this whole process quite a bit easier. First one's called Microsoft Orca. The only reason I included this is to show you visually that this really is a database file, that you can get in through here and set settings for any possible thing that you would want to happen in this installation, and it's all contained within this file. If you want to do some really low-level manipulations of your setup process, you may need to go here. I wouldn't recommend this as your tool of choice, but it's there as a good thing to fall back on if there's something that you need to tweak and you just can't figure out how to. Probably the most popular tool out there for dealing with these things is called Winstall LE. This was the original tool that was shipped with Windows Server 2000 for dealing with this new MSI format that Microsoft had come out with. It no longer ships with the Windows Server CD, but you can download it for free from OnDemand Software's website. And it is sort of the standard tool. As you can see, it lets you go through and configure things like which features you want to be available, which ones you want to install when they're used, which do you want to run from the hard drive, other things like that. You can manipulate any of the files you're going to put in, and it's all done through there. One final note on vendor-supplied MSI setup files. A lot of times you need to do what's called an administrative install before you get these working. This is always the case with Microsoft stuff, so if you're deploying any of that, keep that in mind. Basically what an administrative install does is it takes this setup exe or this package or this MSI and it puts it in a format better suited for sending out across your network to bunches of students. It also does things, in the case of Microsoft, of letting you hard code licensing information in so your students don't have to remember a 25-character cryptic string of text to get your software working. Check with your vendor if there's a specific thing that you're installing to see if this is required. What if there is no MSI? Say that I have something that we've had for 10 years, a piece of software we've been using, and we still use it, and we want to deploy it, but we don't have these kinds of tools. Or the vendor's still around, but they just haven't adopted this technology yet. Or what if you're writing your own software you want to push out and you want to use this method? You can still do it. They've given you, or Microsoft and other vendors have come out with tools to help you develop your own MSI installation packages. And again, many of these are free. So essentially, let's see. This is done through a process called repackaging, and what repackaging does is essentially takes your setup.exe, runs through it, keeps track of what it does, and then builds an MSI package for you. It generally involves taking a picture of what your machine looks like and then running an installation, configuring a piece of software, taking another picture, and then comparing the two and putting the results of what's different in a custom installation package. There are a couple of things to keep in mind if this is something that you need to do. You only ever want to do this on a clean machine. The reason for this is a lot of things. If you've been using a machine for 5 years, you've installed 3 antivirus suites, 5 file sharing programs, you're doing innumerable things on there. There are a lot of things changing. A lot of registry keys are changing constantly. Files are being updated. This snapshotting process is going to catch every one of those. And if you're sending those changes out to students, you're going to end up with a lot of glitches. You're going to want to close everything that's running, including your antivirus software. You don't want to do anything in between the snapshotting process except configuring the software, or it will be a part of your setup. When you're done with this, you'll have an MSI file. You want to go through it with some sort of editor like the 2 I mentioned, and just manually look and see, is there anything in here that doesn't look like it belongs there, and investigate that and potentially trim that out. The goal is to get just a really small, streamlined package to send out to your students. Another thing is if your vendor already supplies an MSI file to you, work with that. Don't repackage it on your own. There are reasons for that, but it's essentially a very difficult process. Locks you out of other things like automatic updates that you might want to take advantage of further down the line. And then you might be tempted to say, you know what, we install 5 applications on laptops. Let's just do one MSI file that puts everything out. You can do that, but it's really not recommended. Best practice would be to do one application at a time. I'm going to go through just really quickly and show you how this tool works. Not in a lot of depth, but just to sort of get you familiar with it so that you know that it's there and you know that it's fairly easy to use. The tool that we're going to look at is Winstall LE. It's available at this URL and it's free. They have a professional edition that's supposed to do some other things, but I haven't played with that yet. So we're going to start here. You're going to install this program. They have a discovery program that you're going to copy to a disk and put on the machine that you're going to be doing your imaging on. So you're going to copy that over or map into it and run this thing, and this is what you're going to see. They start up with just this basic thing that gives you a brief description of the snapshotting process and makes you feel good about what you're about to do. You go in, name your application, tell it where you'd like to store it, tell it where it can save its temporary files, tell it which drives to watch. Remember, it's looking for changes in your registry or on your file system, so you've got to tell it where to be looking. There are some places on your computer you're going to want excluded from this process, like internal Windows settings areas and things like that Windows updates as a course of running. These are built into Winstall by default, but you can add more to it. If there are places you know are going to change that you don't want sent out to students, you can tell it to ignore those. Same with the registry. If there are things changing there, you can tell it to ignore those. And then you're done. It's taken, or it will take a snapshot that looks like this. It essentially looks at every single file and records sort of its state. The reason, it's sort of lucky that I got it on this point right here, but one thing I want to point out is that in addition to monitoring what files change, what registry keys change, it also pays attention to what changes in your INI files. So it has a little bit of intelligence with working with these kinds of things. When it's done, it'll tell you, and then you have a number of steps to take. Essentially, install your application, go through it, run it, configure it exactly the way you want it to be on your student laptop. And then, so long as any of these things you change are stored somewhere in these 3 locations, it's going to be included as part of your deployment. When you're done, you run the program again. It takes an after snapshot, goes through, looks at everything again, and creates an MSI file for you. So what do you do now? You've got this custom package that's built exactly the way you want it. Where do we go? You're basically ready to start tuning this and deploying it. I put tune in there intentionally because you do want to look at it. You want to open it up in something like the editor that comes with Winstall, see if there's anything obviously wrong in it. Just go over it. There are places in here where you can specify which files are really important to this application. By default, Winstall is going to assume that they all are, and it's going to say every file in here should be self-healing. This is going to cause you problems, and the reason for that is that if any of these files contain settings or things like that that the student could later change, then if the student does change those, it's going to notice they're wrong and attempt a reinstallation when they try and run the software. And this caused me an immense amount of frustration when I first started using MSI files until I found out where to change that. So you do that through the editor. You can look at a property of a file and tell it not to be self-healing or to be. You can also go through in the editor and set what user permissions should be set on each one of these files or registry keys. If you've done a lot of tweaking software to make it work in a secure environment, you know that most of the stuff's going to work, but there are going to be like 4 or 5 files that you need to give a user specific access to make it run right, and this is where you set that. And then that's going to end out on every one of your student machines pre-set up like that. Testing your own stuff is, when you go through this repackaging software, it becomes even more important to test what you do than if you use something shipped by a vendor. And you really want to go through everything, test every possible feature that your students could be using and make sure it works right. You don't have to run it through the quiet install process because it's going to be a quiet installation by default. You can just double click on it to test your installation and then go through. So that's the second of our holy trinity of Windows installations. The third is group policy, which Brian touched on briefly. Among many other things, it allows you to push software out to individual users or computers. It works with Windows Installer, lets you elevate your context and install software as administrator when you're running as user or whatever else. It can also push out upgrades and patches. This is something that we really don't have time to get into, but some of the references I'm going to leave with you at the end will tell you how to work with this, and it's a really useful feature. You can also pull back software when it's no longer required. If you go and assign a piece of software to an OU and then you deassign it, you have the option of saying, okay, now pull it back off all the computers you put it on, and it'll do that. So configuring group policy to deploy an MSI package, I'm just going to list the steps here. We're not going to really get into them, but it's a 7-point process. You open your Active Directory management component, right-click on the OU you want to change, go into group policy, create a name for your policy, go into the computer configuration, software settings, add a new package to your software installation, browse to your MSN file or MSI file. You want to use a UNC path for this so your students can get to it too. If you put in on your domain controller C MSI's my MSI, that's not going to be valid for students. So something they can get to over the network, and then select assigned. What assigned does is mean that this software is now assigned to this computer and will be installed next time you reboot. So, where are we on our demo?
We're good. I opted to not install, to map the MSI files. It was a little slow. Through VMware, through a VPN to ASU. So I opted not to do that. I unchecked that actually this morning. But I did have it do one thing, and that's to map the network drives, install the printers, and you can see here that it's also saving my credentials. So if I try to connect to, we'll do lawprint.asu automation. You'll notice that this process won't ask me for a password or a name. It's using those cache credentials. So that's how it went through and added the printers. And there's just a logon script that takes care of that. So, but when I was doing it back at ASU, I had the MSI files attached to the OU, ran it, and they install just fine. They work just
I'm going to pull up my last slide, which is just some references to help you get started on this. We can take questions for the next little while, but some of these may be pretty valuable to you. This top one in particular, I was going to name this slide recommended reading, but I realized that the first one's really required if you're going to deal with this technology. It is the single best resource I've found for dealing with MSI files and installations, and I highly recommend that you read it. The other one's Windows Installer's SDK. This is what Microsoft puts out. It's more geared towards people developing software, but if there's some nitty-gritty issue you need to dig into, it's useful. And then there's a company called appdeploy.com that has a number of facts and articles about this process, and they're also quite useful. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to go into? I know we went over some things really quickly, but...
Here, grab the other mic in case the questions. You can use this process, but you're kind of, once you're on the network, you're getting infected. So it's really something that's lower level down. At Arizona State, we actually have a thing that before you can get on the network, it scans your computer and tells you got to put these patches on before you get on the network. So you really have to do something at that time. For this, one of the group policies that we're applying is you have to have your computer set to automatically update. So that way, when they're on the network, they're scanned, they're good. That way, when the next big thing comes out, the next fall, the next spring, whatever, their computer's patched and will not hopefully get the virus or whatever it is. Yeah.
Are you guys running your own SUS?
No, we're actually not. Yeah, we're just pointing at Microsoft. We have a caching. The network people do a caching of it, and so it comes down really, really fast. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we do run SUS, and that's something we add to our group policy is that when someone gets on, they will be assigned as a client to that process.
Right. Yes?
I'd like to address the gentleman's critical updates and patches question. Microsoft has a free CD with all the critical updates and patches available on CD that are completely up to date. I ordered it. It's free. Even the shipping is free. And then you can do that offline.
There you go. That's a good idea. Keep that at your help desk for people and give it to students. Yes?
What do you use to scan or to have students scan their computers?
It's built by the main campus IT department. It's actually a custom application that they wrote that does a Nessus scan, a very slimmed down Nessus scan, but we don't like it at all. We're actually looking at other products to buy, and Dan was actually telling me that Cisco came out with a product that will scan your computer for you and not let you on the network. What's that? Yeah. So that's something that our campus is looking at, and we'll have something.
Yeah, Cisco has
Does it require a client install?
It does. It requires a new, essentially a network interface client. The Cisco sales rep was really good about bragging to us that everyone was releasing these enabled clients for their network cards. So you should be able to get them for all of your students. But yeah, it's called the Cisco AAA server. It essentially, before you even get an open port on the network, causes your computer to be scanned for Windows patch levels, antivirus DAT levels, just all sorts of security-related things.
Is that part of the 1X protocol?
It works sort of in conjunction with it, but it's not part of 1X, no. And it's not available on anything non-Cisco yet, so be prepared to pay if you want that.
Yes, way in the back.
You've given us a lot of information, so thank you. You're putting antivirus on all their computers, is that correct?
We do McAfee.
Oh, McAfee, okay. So where are you uninstalling any existing antivirus? Because if you put two on there, you still have
Right now, actually, our group policy does not do the antivirus software. Actually, as we speak, our help desk guys are trying to figure out how to script the MSI installation to look for other antivirus software packages. You can customize it in any way, shape, or form you can imagine. And so That's more of an advanced feature of the MSI system.
My experience with that is that the McAfee stuff or the NAI stuff does go and uninstall competitors' products, which you may or may not like. One thing that you can set in the Active Directory, when you go and you say, I want this piece of software assigned to this computer, rather than saying assigned, like I suggested in my presentation, you can click Published. What that does is it makes it so that software is optional to that computer. If you go into then the control panel, add remove programs, you'll see it listed there. If you click on it, it'll install it under elevated privileges, but you don't have to. And stuff like antivirus where there may be conflicting programs, that might be a good approach.
One thing I wanted to add too, and I'm not sure if we made it clear enough, but once you've made your MSI files, if you're not a Windows 2000 network, you're something else, and you can't run our utility, and you can't join them to the domain. If you can set up a website where students have to log on securely, you can put your MSI files up on a website and say, click here to download the antivirus software. And it's a one click, and it'll install all for them. So that's kind of the other option to go down. Yeah.
What's your strategy been for addressing all of the Windows XP home users that show up on campus?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we, like I said, we don't have a required program. We strongly recommend XP Pro for just this reason. We still get 98, 95 Linux, Mac, and that's fine. And that's just something that right now we're just doing them the old-fashioned way. We're actually going to be building the website so that they can go and download the MSI files themselves. But we're just trying to encourage XP Pro. And so far, we get about 75%, 70% of the ownership is XP Pro because we really hammer it into them. So, are there any other questions? All right.
One thing about our engineering department, talking about patch engineering, like they've got a virtual VLAN that costs a little bit more running Cisco, and they put you behind that virtual VLAN. You stay in purgatory,
Yeah. That's
and
the way.
They're pretty strict. That's like once a week they'll check it.
Yeah.
The Cisco AAA stuff, if you're interested in that, will put you on a private VLAN where all you can get to is a site that you make that contains all the patches they need. And so it's a cool product. It's a very expensive one.
So.
So you're going to put PowerPoint on the website?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to send it to Elmer. It'll be on, hopefully, if he'll be posting it. But I'll post it up. If for some reason they're done adding slides, then you can shoot me an email. I have business cards up here, and I can get you a copy of it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thanks. It's been a great
Thank
audience.
you very much.
Had to do on time.
What's that?